So, Heather, here we are in what is, in many respects, the unthinkable territory, but it's certainly not something that we hadn't contemplated, or at least were aware of enough to be afraid of.
Oh, absolutely. I've been terrified about this from the moment I saw Donald Trump descend that escalator in June of 2015. I knew then, and I wrote at the time for Salon, that he was a formidable presence. He was going to be formidable. I didn't laugh it off. A lot of people did. Certainly the media did. You know, there's that famous moment on Meet the Press when Keith Ellison said,
Yep.
I think he can win, and everybody, all the elite insider journalists, ha, 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 they laughed. It was just so ridiculous. Well, I didn't feel that way. I never did, and I don't think you did either. We've talked about this many, many times over the past year. He was capable of connecting on some level. I mean, but what terrified us was the level that he was connecting on is a very ugly, primal, negative, dark level. But the fact that he was connecting and that he had that capability always seemed possible to me, and I just didn't know. You know, you go into an election, we saw, we were watching the polls, and it was close, but, of course the polls were off. I mean, we thought that that Hillary Clinton was going to pull it off. But nonetheless, I mean, the possibility was always going to be there, and, my stomach has been in knots for a very long time, worrying about this day, and now it's here. So,
and I have to say that I was not surprised by how well he did in the Republican primary, but count me as one of those people who did not think that he had a chance in the. I mean, I don't want to say a chance, but I thought maybe it was a 10 or 15% chance in the general election. And, I want to get into a little bit of what happened, because I think there are, the success has many parents, and failure has many, is an orphan, or I don't know. I can't even get my sayings correct. But I think there was many reasons why we saw this. But the one figure that stood out to me, and then we can talk about sort of, first thoughts on what happens next. But one figure in just looking at this election, and I know that we've referenced this number in this program a couple of times, but it's important, I think, for people to be aware of this, is that in 2012, Barack Obama got about 66 million votes, and Romney about 61 million. Clinton, it appears, is going to actually end up, and they're still counting some votes, but with about 60 million votes, a little bit less. So she underperformed even Romney in 2012, and Trump performed even less than that because he's won the Electoral College, but lost the actual vote across the country. So the Republican vote did not go up. In fact, he underperformed Romney. But the Democratic vote went down by almost 6.5 million votes. And this is what is so shocking about it, because we were told the one thing, right? I mean, that the academics have been telling us for years, and that many of us were counting on, was this notion that this superior ground game, and not even superior, but one that existed versus one that didn't, was going to carry the day, and that didn't seem to work.
Well, I remember a friend of mine a few years ago, in having this conversation, who works in politics, saying, when I was going, well, but there's the ground game and whatever. He goes, when you're talking about ground game, it's BS. He goes, field is BS. And I thought at the time he was nuts, because everybody says that that is. And let's talk about the other side of that. We always also assumed it took vast amounts of money and many, 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 hours of expensive TV advertising to win. Trump has proved all of that to be wrong.
Well, on the TV side, if you were to actually calculate what his services in kind basically were from the TV industry, he earned the media in a way. You don't have to pay for the media, but he had a unique talent for earning media. But go ahead. I don't want to.
Well, no. I think that's a valid point. But that required the willing participation of the media, which were more than willing to do this. He had a certain kind of fascinating train wreck charisma about him that the media was more than happy to feature. They made a lot of money from him. Probably more money than if he had bought advertising outright. One way or another, they made a killing, whether it was from advertising from Clinton or from him. But either way, this notion that there is one path that politicians must take, and it's been studied, and they've got models, and I guess we could even talk about the polling a little bit in that regard. But all of this has been turned on its head by Trump. He's a different animal completely. He comes out of this. He comes at this from a very, very different direction. And by the way, he didn't listen to any of the people on his own side who told him to change. He refused. He didn't do that. He went with his instincts, and his instincts turned out to be enough. And I honestly think that part of this was he has an instinct which we should have seen from the beginning, and we kind of saw it but didn't understand how it was going to play. The insult, comic side of him, the name-calling that he did of his rivals in the primaries, the way he hammered Hillary Clinton relentlessly and in the most crude and despicable terms. They were chanting "lock her up," as if she was, it was almost like witch burning or something by the end of the campaign. This was very, very effective in turning off voters that would have potentially voted for her. And that is, as you say, he didn't outperform Romney. He shouldn't have. But she really underperformed Obama. And I think that, you have to give Trump credit for this. He understands that negative, ugly side of the American psyche, and he worked it relentlessly for months and months. And by the way, all that free airtime that the media gave him, in conjunction with their own relentless pounding of Hillary Clinton over her emails, that was enough to make an awful lot of people, millions of people, kind of say, you know what, I don't want anything to do with this. And you could see it. They interviewed people over and over again in the last days of the campaign where people just said, I don't like either one of them. I can't stand it. This is horrible. I'm disgusted by the whole thing. And that was Trump. I think Trump, with the media playing, along with him, I think they made that happen. I'm not trying to make excuses for her. Obviously, she made tremendous errors and was probably the wrong person for her time, and maybe, a million things are wrong with her. But I do think that you have to give Trump credit for what he did right to win. And I think that absolutely suppressing her vote in overt and, sort of subconscious ways, I think he's got a real feeling for that. Doesn't he? It's pretty obvious.
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, this was clearly the strategy at one point was we need to put Trump in a do no harm mode to the extent that we can and just drive down Clinton's vote totals. And I think, the one thing that is clear here is that the Democratic Party voters, and this makes sense when I articulate it right now. It just seems, it seems obvious in some ways. We know that Democrats don't come out as strongly in off-year elections as they do in on-year elections, which suggests that these voters are low propensity, somewhat on the fence voters. And the idea that they would be more susceptible to the impact of negative campaigning seems seems obvious. And I guess the bottom line is that vaunted ground game did not make a difference. Maybe it did, but it didn't make enough of a difference.
Right.
Digby, we got to take a break. When we come back, let's talk more about this, because I want to talk about that Donald Trump phenomena that you're talking about. We'll be right back. Sam Seder, Ring of Fire Radio. We're talking to Heather Digby Parton.